In the last video, we made the side menu collapse and show and worked on a few animations. So now we have this application here. So if we double click, it will hide and show the menu. Next up, we really need to do the pages now before we can go any further. So without pages in the application, we can't really navigate. What we want is, say, clicking the home button, loads in the home page in this section here, and clicking the others obviously loads the other pages into this main window area. For the settings, we could do a pop-up, but in case this goes onto things like mobile or we want to do more cross-platform, I think I will keep the application as almost a single window application, and we'd load the settings either into here or just slide straight over and maybe expand this menu further out. So the topic of this video will be to implement some page navigation in a sense, or page loading. Let's take a look at how we're going to do that. So we will start with looking at the IDataTemplate. This is not necessarily specific to Avalonia as such. This concept exists already in MVVM. And what this is typically we have our views here, and then we bind the views to view models. So we have effectively some kind of data in the background, the view model data, and we tell this view this is the view model we want. You can think of an IDataTemplate as the reverse, where we want to tell the data model what view it should load in. So it's literally the polar opposite. We can see a quick example here that doesn't really give you much context as such if you don't already understand it. But what the match will do first is every time a view model is trying to bind some data, so for example when we do this, if we're binding a data context, this will new up this view model, and because it's in the context of the view, this will kick in and we will check if we've got a match. So what we can do then is check if we have, say, a view model here as the type, and if so, it will call build, and what it will return instead of the view model would then be a control, so something in the UI element. That means we could then bind things like content controls, that could be the page area. You could bind it to my content, and then have the content template simply bound to your class we just made that will convert this my content and replace this bit with a text block. And because we don't really want to have to specify this part over and over, so every time we want to bind, we don't want to then have to check and force this data template to run. Instead, we'll rely on the match being correct and always try to replace the view model items, effectively the datas, with specific controls if we so deem. And then what we're doing there is effectively exactly what the file new solution Avalonia MVVM application will do. If we'd have selected the MVVM app, it would have already made something in the root here called view locator. And this view locator is going to implement IDataTemplate. So we just tell it to implement the functions for us. We now have this. The match will be if simply the data is a view model base. So if it's anything to do with the view model, we'll match and attempt to build something from that. That means if we bind a control to a view model, then we can build something specific for the view model in here. For now, if we just make a new view, actually, we don't even have a new view. We don't even have a views folder yet. So first, if we just make a folder called views, we want to drag the main view in, and in here, let's now make another view. So we'll do an Avalonia user control, and we'll call this one home page view model, or rather home page view, not view model. And we have a home page here, so now we can say welcome to home page. If we do that once more, so we've got two pages to work with, we'll call this one the process page view. So there we have our two views ready. In the main view, if we wanted to put that somewhere, it wants to be in this grid area here in the second column. We have the two columns here. So before we do that, they don't need to be in order in the grid. So what's on the left or right doesn't have to come before or after, because what we can do is simply do a content control and do a grid.column equals 1, which is the second grid. And inside here for now, let's just bind to the home page view first to see it working. We don't have the views in here yet. So let's just do view and that'll be the views. And now in here, we should be able to access the homepage view. There we go. And if we build, do we see the homepage view in here? Nope, we've done something wrong. And that's because we started to implement this and didn't finish. So for now, let's just return null so we can actually build this. There we go. And we should see the content in here, but we don't at the minute. Let's just run this. And it can't find images now. And that's because we haven't done a / on the assets. So it's relative to where this view was. And because we've moved the view into a subfolder, it's expecting the assets to be inside the view folder. So the / on there fixes the images, and now we can see the home page has appeared here. So it's in black. Let's just make it a little bit more visible and just do a, well, you just put it on the control for now. Foreground white. It's only temporary, so we don't really care about putting the styles straight on the control for now. Compile, and we should see there's the page loading. So next up, what we want to do is this needs to be dynamic. So we want to swap this out from being relative to a specific view and being bound to a view model. We will go into the main view model, which is the view model for the current main window. And then here we'll want to have some properties that allow us to kind of navigate pages. So one thing we'll do is we will have a private view model base, and we want the concept of current page. So this will be the current page we're on. We'll obviously want to tag that with the observable property so it can be bound to. And then on top of that, I'm just going to make some private read-only creations for now until we have dependency injection of the view models. So I'll have a home page view model, which we don't even have yet. So we'll make one, because remember the pages are going to be view models, and we're going to use the view locator to convert the view models into actual views. So this one will be a home page view model. It will be partial, and it will implement the view model base. And here, let's just have a public string called test. Make it a property that we can bind to. And just call it home for now. So again, completely temporary, just something to actually bind to prove that binding is working. And then we'll copy and paste that and make one for the process page view model. Now we could have, instead of a view model base, we could have like a page view model base if we ever get the point where we want some commonality between pages, which we may well do shortly. But for now, that's the view models done. So in here, we can have the home page, we can have the process page, and then you get the idea for the rest. We'll just copy this principle. And for now, again, we don't have dependency injection yet, so we'll just simply new them up. I don't know whether it can do the new. Yes, it can. Just the shorthand like that. These we're not going to expose. We don't want to bind to these directly. These are going to be in the background through commands to load in specific pages. So these aren't meant to be exposed to the public. Now we want a constructor. So I'd normally put the constructor between the properties and the methods. So I'm going to put the constructor here. And we want to default to setting the current page with view model binding as well to the home page. So now we could bind to the current page and expect it to load home page. Let's see if that works. So now we'll actually get rid of all this. And all we should have to do is do the content bound to current page. And now what that should do, because we're binding content, which is expecting content, which ultimately is where this should kick in for a data template when it's expecting content. It should check if the data, so this data here, matches this. So is it a view model? So in order to debug, can we just debug by putting a breakpoint here? We'll see if that hits, and it will return null at the moment when we run. And it's not actually firing that view model here, and that's because I forgot to do the thing that we need to do, which is in the app, In order to fire it for everything, so we don't have to inject it, we want this data template being called for everything across the board. If we go to the app and in the top here, we'll do application.datatemplates. We'll need a namespace as well. XML namespace, local equals, and then it's just this application because it's in the top level folder. Now in here, we can do local and get the view locator. That will now just add to the application data templates a view locator. That's the same thing as in the background here in wherever, doing data templates.add and then new view locator. We're just doing this kind of coding, but in the XAML. That's just convention, really. Now when we run this, hopefully, if I've done that right, there you go, it's disappeared. So hopefully this will fire our check that now it's found a binding. It's going to check if it is a view model base. And you can see all these are views. So this is every little view. This is all the text and everything else. And all these don't pass because they're not view models. So if we remove that breakpoint, when we eventually hit the one that is bound to a view model base, which is here, you can now see it's a home page view model. We can now do something with this and return something. So if we were to just say, for example, return new home page view, and that's all we're going to do. If we compile, we should see that this returns the home page now, but we just returned a static home page view. So what that does mean is if we change this to the process page, you'll find we still will just obviously return the home page because that's what we've done. We've just made it static in the view locator. So next up would be to fix this to now return a certain type based on the view model. And again, this is done for you as part of the Avalonia template, but let's walk through it. What we want to do is simply expect that if you have a view model, the name should end or contain view model, and then whatever else is in there, home page, we want to look for a view or a user control effectively that has the same name, but instead of view model has view. That's why I've called this home page view and this home page view model. So that's all we're going to do. We're going to look for if the object coming in is named view model, and if it is, look for a view with the same name but with view instead of view model, and then return an instance of that. First we need to do the null check. So if data is null, return null. Let's change that to data. That's normally coming in as data. I believe there's a shorthand in C#8 for this, so we don't have to do 2 lines. I can't remember it off the top of my head though, so that'll do for now. Next up, we want to get the name of this actual object coming in, so the class name. So we can do the name, which is the data's type, and then full name. Then we'll null check that, and we will replace, if you remember what we said, is view model with view. And look, it's already I don't know how that's even figured that out. That's actually filling out for us exactly what we're about to type. And then we just want to do a string compare of, I do culture. Normally what I do is invariant culture. And that will now get the name for us from the view model class. So this will then resolve to homepage view, not homepage view model. So we should call this really view name. And then next up we want the type. And it's already figured out we want to get the type from that. So what this is now going to try and do through reflection is to figure out if it can actually get this type, a homepage view model. Last up, all we then need to do is check if the type, well, to be honest, let's do an inversion. So if the type is null, return null. Otherwise, we know we've got a type. And now we can just new up a control from that. And again, it's pretty much guessing everything we're doing here. So that's exactly what we want to do. Other than we need a null check at the end of this as well. And then if that is correct, we've now created the view. So we've created a homepage view, and we want to bind this actual view model straight to that view. So it's also bound to the view. So for that, we just set the data context to the data. And that's it. We turn that new control. So what that will have done, it comes in, well, let's run it actually so you can see. We come into here, we get the process page view model in this case now. It's not null, so it carries on. It's going to get the process page view model as a string here as full name. It's going to replace view model with view, and we end up with process page view. And you can see it's a fully qualified name with all the namespace. We're going to use reflection to try and create the type, which it's managed to do. So there's our page view that we want to instantate now. Because it's not null, we carry on. We create a new instance. So now we have a new page view. You can see there it is, welcome to process. And then it's going to also bind the data context now to that view model we passed in and return it. And that allows us now to generate views from view models. Because we have now a view model called test, let's just quickly go into the process page and see if this works. So we'll do label, content, binding test. And this doesn't know the data type, which also needs to be XML namespace, view model, batch process dot view models. It will be process view model, and now it can bind to test. If this works, we should now see the word test in the page instead of welcome to there, or rather process, because that's what we set this one to. If you want the previewer working as well, which in here won't currently work, and we can see there's nothing there, it's because remember you have your design.data context to set so that it can have it there. And then again, the styles, if we remove the default style for the background isn't applied because the view is what has the background. But considering this is just temporary anyway, we will remove the styling on those two pages for now. So that's the view locator part now done. And what we need to do next is have a way when clicking these buttons, it loads in the pages for us. For that, we'll start using the view models now. So we have the main view model. We want a command similar to the size menu resize. We will want one that says go to home. And for that, all we need to do is set the current page to the home page. Make this a relay command. Do the same for process. And we'll do the same for all the other pages after. In the main view, we have the buttons, so we can see here's the home button, and what we want to do on a button, you can bind to a command, and in that command now we should see go to home, which is the main view model. Maybe we've got to compile for that to show, or maybe I've typed something wrong. Method must have a return type. I've obviously messed something up here. Oh, yep. I haven't even put void. There we go. That should now bind to that command. And if we copy that, paste it to the process, change this to go to process. IntelliSense has added open close for me. We should now find clicking the buttons forces the current page to change. And attempted by method, compile method exception. So if we go to the main view model, private void go to home, private void go to there. What's that complaining about? That's just because I'm not using expression bodies, because I can do this. So it's got to be the binding. I've done something. Ah, yeah, of course. I've bound to the actual command, the command we made, not the command that's generated by MVVM. That's why the IntelliSense was adding the brackets for me. I was actually binding wrong. So now, there we go. We can now navigate between pages, and we just expand that for the other pages. I think another thing we want to do as well is the page we're on, we want to probably keep this style or even change it a different color so we know what page we're actively on. I think we'll make that page maybe like this magenta color. So let's just find a color we like for the background. So let's start with magenta. I think that's a bit too bright, so lower them down maybe. Bit too dark, and to be honest I think I want it a bit more bluey, so try to bring the blues in a bit. Lower that down a bit. Oh, there we go. That's like a nice, yeah, I like that colour. That's very much in between a purple and a blue. So we'll go with 6633DD. We'll make that a new resource for the background. We go to the styles. Oh no, not styles app for the dictionary. We've got primary background, primary hover background. Now I've already got a hover background there. So let's just update that actually. And let's see, I think that was on the, oh no, that's the background hover we've got at the minute. So, oh, I do like that though. I really like that now, as opposed to the other hover, but we've made a decision. So we need to keep that, we'll clone that, and we'll have active. So instead of primary hover, it'll be primary active background. And we'll do 6633DD. Now we combine this when we make the button active. So now we can just tag the button style that when it's active it gets this colour. Now there's many ways of doing this, and I'm just going to stick to the most simple and basic one. We'll bind each button to a class, and we'll have that as, say, home button classes. And we'll do this because we may well want in future to style these buttons or to set them in states that the view model would expect them to look visually different. And we don't have that many pages in the application either. So this is the way I'm just going to do it for now. Again, you can do many different ways of doing this, and it's going to result in quite a few properties, but they don't cost us anything, so let's just do it anyway. We'll have the private string as the home page, what did we call it? Home button classes, home page classes, home button classes. So, home button classes. This will be observable property, and this can be current page equals home page. If it is, we will do, see it's even trying to guess as well, classes there. This will then be, we'll call it just active, or otherwise blank, like so. Observable property, what's wrong with that? Oh, because we've set it like that. So for this again, when we want to do this style, this is where we have to do the public string home button classes as a getter. And because this is the actual property, not an injectable one, we'll just name it the final name straight away. And what we need to now do is when the current page changes, notify property changed for that home button classes, or the name of rather. So every time the current page changes, it will refire the notify property change for this for us. I don't know why we're getting that warning, because this is perfectly valid to do this. I guess maybe it's after us doing that, which I don't see why. Maybe it just doesn't want us accessing that. So either way, that would work. And now we'll do that for the process as well. And then we'll obviously do this for all the other buttons after. That would be the process button. It'd still be active only if it's process. We could obfuscate this out to just being a private read-only button active class, just for brevity. Private, could even do a const to be honest. How have I opened a dual panel? What button could I possibly have clicked to do that? Oh, and it's all gone. Private const string button active class equals active. And there we go. So we have the button process. And I think that is it. We should now be able to bind, well, that's already bound actually. And that should actually update and show the oh, we haven't done the class in the style yet. So let's just chuck that on the process button classes. And now what we need to do, this should end up with a class of active when it's active, but we haven't done anything in the style for an active button yet. So if we look in the styles, we have the border, the labels, the buttons, and we have pointer over. So what we want is, because we're changing the background and the content presenter, we'll want this style, and we will want the button to be .active, and then we can change the background to a value of dynamic resource primary active background. And of course I've done something wrong. And it's these bindings. Oh yeah, of course, of classes is an array. So we can, this makes it a lot easier actually. I forgot all about this. So the classes can be just dot and then the name of the class you want. So we can just do class.active. And then we can now bind it to a specific thing. So all we actually need to do, and this is actually a bit cleaner as well, than doing the classes, you can just do home page is active. Change that to a boolean. And then all we're flagging as if the page is active and leaving the view up to its job of styling the view, which is the whole point of the view. Do current page, home page is that. And the process page is if this is process page. So now we have two properties that are simply if the page is active. And in the view, we can now bind it to if the home button, home page is active. And I believe that should now work. Do the same for this class. Process page is active. And now, if everything I've done there is correct, there we go. So now we have an active looking process page. And if we run this and click, there we go. So now the only thing I'd want is on hover, probably not re-highlighting. So the order of precedence here is active should be above hover, so it doesn't override the active visual, which should be as simple as moving this active template below the pointer over. So it should go here. And I think that will then override the style. We should probably point at the bottom so the transparent one's also the same. There we go. So now we've got a page changer along with the correct visual style. So that's it for this one, guys. We now have page navigation along with the nice visual UI to go with it. And next up will be making the home page, I guess.